I want to ask you, what do you think would be the conflict right now between Ukraine and Russia if Medvedev would be the president? I was just thinking about it actually today. If he, instead of Putin, would be the president now, how that conflict would look like with Ukraine?
I don't think too much differently, and I'll tell you why. Because Medvedev has a role to play right now. He's not the head of state. He's not the commander-in-chief. Putin is. Medvedev's job right now is to not stir up trouble, but is to say things that get people to think, to get people to worry, to put a marker on the table. But Putin's job, basically Medvedev's job is to growl and bark. He's the attack dog that the responsible owner has on the leash. And when somebody comes too close, you let the leash off a little bit, and the attack dog does that. But Medvedev knows that's the role he's playing. If Medvedev ever became the person behind, he would have to change, because Russia, the leadership demands of being the Russian president are so great that it defines the person. So Medvedev would come in, and Russia would not tolerate that, because that's not Russia. That's Medvedev playing a role. But the Russian government is a government founded on maturity, responsibility, and set principles on how to interact with the world. It's actually pretty disrespectful of Russia to say that if Putin left and Medvedev came in, that all of Russia would change differently. What does that say about the nation? Not very much. It does. What that says is Russia is only one person, and that's buying into the American model, which says Russians are so stupid and simplistic and ridiculous that one person defines this massive nation of 158 million people. Just like Medvedev doesn't define them. Medvedev's playing a role right now. But if Medvedev became president, the reality of Russia, the demands of Russia would define how Medvedev acts. You can't be the leader of Russia, I think, and say the things that Medvedev is saying. That doesn't mean that he's wrong. He's doing it on purpose, and he's doing it with permission. He has a role to play, because Putin can't say what Medvedev's saying. And everything Medvedev says is the truth. Mm-hmm. It's the harsh truth. But Medvedev can say it without filters.
Right.
And but the second he becomes president, filters come into play, because now, when Medvedev speaks now, there's no reality behind his words, meaning he doesn't get to make those decisions. If Putin said this, the world would have to react, because Putin is reality. The president is reality. And so his words now carry far more gravitas, far more meaning, which is why Putin doesn't say what Medvedev says. Now, in private, maybe Putin does. Maybe Putin thinks that way. But as I said, the reality of being president defines the actions of the individual more than the individual defines the reality of being president. Russia is a major state, a major nation, very complex nation that dictates the way that the president must behave. Now, that doesn't mean that Putin's not a very capable man. Of course he is. And Putin's been president for, coming on, 2.5 decades. And so he has defined the presidency in a way that nobody else has. The presidency has been shaped by Putin, et cetera. But it's not Putin shaping it. It's a cooperative thing between a great man. I mean, look, I think Vladimir Putin will go down in history as one of the greatest leaders of all time. And for Russia, if the Russians don't understand that Vladimir Putin saved Russia, I don't care what you think about Vladimir Putin. And believe me, I could sit there, if I were a Russian, I could nitpick everything. He inherited the worst situation possible from Boris Yeltsin. a nation in total collapse, total disarray, no military worthy of the name, no nothing. Yeltsin had a pack of wolves around him when he left who were going to come in and devour Russia. And anybody who lived in Russia in the 1990s knows what I'm saying. I know because I have family that lived there. My wife's family lived there, lives there still. Life didn't have much meaning back then. People were starving to death. The life expectancy dropped. The productivity went down. You could survive only by selling your soul to the West. See, a lot of people misunderstand the relationship between the West and Russia. And especially a lot of Russians do. See, a lot of Russians fell into the belief that because somebody from the West extended a hand and picked you up and helped you, lift you up, gave you a paycheck and all this stuff, that they were your friends. They weren't your friends. They've never been your friends. They don't like you. You see, a friend doesn't prop you up. A friend helps build you up, helps you define who you are, build you up to be you, the individual. That's what a friend does. A friend doesn't take you, shape you into something that becomes a compliant tool of their power projection. And that's all the United States was doing with a select segment of Russian society. That's all the West was doing. We empowered oligarchs to steal all of your wealth, transfer it out of Russia, build themselves up, and then we threw crumbs at you and said, you must be happy, you must be satisfied with the crumbs. Vladimir Putin did not want to be president. He didn't come up and say, I want to take over from Yeltsin. In fact, he said the exact opposite when Yeltsin approached him and said, I need you to be president. He said, I am not the man. I'm not ready for this job. I don't want this job. And Yeltsin said, that's why you have to take the job, because everybody else here will eat this country. Everybody will eat this country. You're the only one who doesn't have the appetite to eat the country. You will save the country. And he did. Vladimir Putin saved Russia. It wasn't perfect. How can you operate? How can anybody speak of perfection when you inherit a nation in free fall? So it wasn't perfect. Did he make compromises? I hate it when people say he dealt with the oligarchs. Who the hell else was he going to deal with? You want him to come in and line them all up and shoot them? Oh, but then he becomes Stalin, you see. It's a democracy. Vladimir Putin believes in democracy. But when you inherit an imperfect democracy, you can't change it overnight. You have to change it incrementally, and you have to do it in a manner that solves all the problems at once. The problem set that he has would bend the mind of any lesser person, bend their mind. And yet people are critical because he did this, he did that, he did this. He had no other options. But look what he did in totality. All of the decisions that he made were balanced, for the most part fair, and Russia built itself back up in its own image, not in the image that was being projected on it by outside powers, in its own image. And that's what gets everybody so mad, because we didn't want that to happen. We did not want Russia to build up in its own image. We wanted to shape Russia, define Russia, control Russia. And Vladimir Putin said, no. The greatest leader in Russian history is Vladimir Putin. And I'll put him up there with, in terms of his impact, with Lenin, Stalin, Catherine the Great, Peter the Great, you name it. You put them up there, the challenges they face, with one exception. I think Stalin faced some pretty big challenges that historians don't readily embrace because they focus on the methods and not the results. And they don't focus on what he inherited and why he chose the methods. I'm not here to defend Stalin, but I am going to say that Stalin had World War II and Putin, thankfully, has not had that. But Ukraine is his World War II. Ukraine is an existential struggle with the collective West that's tried to destroy him. But he also inherited, the 1990s. And then throughout the 2000s, people don't understand how much the West was trying to destroy him. We were never Russia's friends. We were never Putin's friends. Listen to every single advisor that talks to American president about Vladimir Putin, how they hate the man. They belittle the man. They knock him down. Why? Because he's not their man. Because he's not playing their game. So that's why I say he's the greatest leader in modern Russian history, perhaps all of Russian history. He's the best thing that happened to Russians. Russians don't appreciate this. I know a lot of Russians do, but I also know a lot of Russians that sit there and buy into this Western liberal, progressive, wokeism. Guys, it's poison. It's pure poison. We can get away with it here in the United States because we're a different country. That's what people need to understand. We have a different history. We developed differently. We have different inputs. We have different, centers of gravity have come together. It cannot be replicated anywhere else. So anybody that's out there looking at America and saying, I want that, understand you can never have this because this is a unique American experience. And I'm here to tell you right now, it's broke. It has potential. We can do something with this, but it's fundamentally broken. You don't experience it. You don't see it. It's bad here. Really, really bad here. And so why do you believe us when we come out and say, this is what we want to export to you? We don't want you to have what we have. We want you to give us everything we need to sustain what we have. But we don't care about you. We don't at all. And and so I get a little frustrated when people start, talking about Russia, its leadership, its role in the world. Is Russia perfect? Hell no, it's not. Nothing is. Nothing is. But is Russia doing the best that it possibly can, given the circumstances that it inherited? Absolutely. Look at how unselfish Russia is. I mean, frankly speaking, look at how unselfish Russia is. If Russia was America, there would be people in Russia and people in Europe and around the world that wouldn't have the lives that they enjoyed today, because Russia, could have been selfish, could have gone out and sought to exploit, could have gone out to try and suck the life out of nations. Why do you think Africa likes Russia? Why do you think Africa likes Russia? Because the Russians aren't there to steal African wealth. The Russians have never been there to steal African wealth. Russia has never colonized Africa. Russia has always gone in saying, what can we do to benefit each other? And when they say benefit each other, they mean that. See, when we say, America says benefit each other, we mean, what can we do to benefit me? We don't care about you. Russia comes in and says, what can we do to benefit each other? And the African people know this, they appreciate it, and that's why they're responding the way they do. And I think the rest of the world would wake up to that as well. So, I don't know how we got off on this rant, but I get frustrated so many times when I listen to, Polish government speak about the Russian government as if it has ill intent. The Russian government has no ill intent towards Poland whatsoever. But Russia will not sit back passively as the Poles allow themselves to be used by the United States for things that aren't good for Poland. Please, Polish people, look at Ukraine. That is your future. That is your future. And it doesn't have to be. Anything and everything the United States touches dies. It dies. It doesn't have to be. If Russia had its way, Ukraine would be a thriving land that wasn't polluting its soil, wasn't polluting its air, was producing things properly. But instead, this seething mass of corruption and dead people, death, destruction. And the Poles are buying into the notion that they now are going to inherit the mantle of being the center of gravity for Central Europe. You're not. You're a black hole. You're not the good kind of gravity. You're the bad kind of gravity. You're going to suck everything in, and everything's going to be destroyed.
Scott, in spite of being so many years away from my country, I actually love my country, and I love the land, and I love the people, and I know the potential, and I really, really want you to know that this government does not represent the entire country. I want you to know this. And this is the most scary part, because they act and they speak as if they do, with such a cockiness and arrogance that it's just hard for me to watch that. And I want to ask you now about China, because this is actually what I would like to end this conversation today. I think like the clock is ticking, right? And we might be moving into that direction now with this conflict and Taiwan. So let me tell you what, again, Polish Prime Minister has said just very recently. And for the first time, Chinese embassy has responded without mentioning his name. They said one of the Polish officials said something of this nature that, I'm quoting his words. He said, when he was in the United States, by the way, during this visit, he said that if Ukraine doesn't win this conflict now, Ukraine has to win this conflict, because if it doesn't, China will attack Taiwan the next day. Literally, that's what he said. And the Chinese embassy has responded to his words, straightforward, without sugarcoating, not to compare Ukraine and China and Taiwan and stay out of it and don't get involved in this. How do you think they can drag Europe? Because it looked like to me, like, why is he talking about it? The mouthpiece, right? Are they trying to drag Europe into this conflict with Taiwan? And if so, to what extent Europe can be used in that conflict?
Well, my dogs have decided to bark. I don't know why.
Okay. Good moment.
Yeah, we have there's people outside who are doing stuff in neighbor's yard, and I can't control it. So
no worries.
I apologize to your viewers. I'm not disrespectful. It's just the reality of having dogs. Anyways, I'll try and work through this. First of all, let's just be real here. Poland has no say whatsoever about what China is going to. China is a great power, a global power, a real power. China in the last decade has spent $7 to $10 trillion developing economic relationships around the world through the Belts and Roads Initiative and development programs. Poland has done nothing. Poland, so your prime minister goes to the United States. It's like a little kid walking on the football field with a football player talking tough to the other team. But you can't play football. You don't belong on the field. So no one cares what Poland says. What Poland's doing is the desperate act of somebody who's looking at Ukraine, realizing that they're going to lose in Ukraine, that Ukraine can't win. And so they're desperately trying to draw other people into the conflict by creating a false comparison. China and Taiwan is an issue that would be resolved by China and Taiwan. Poland has no vote. Poland asks Poland's opinion because no one cares about Poland's opinion. So for Poland to express its opinion on this issue is obscene, frankly speaking. And it also shows this gross disrespect. I mean, again, if you're going to try and insinuate yourself into a conversation, at least be informed about it. Understand that China does not seek conflict with Taiwan, that the entire Chinese policy toward Taiwan is peaceful resolution. China does not want war. War is the last possible option, one to be avoided at all costs. That war will only occur with Taiwan if Taiwan seeks to become independent or allow other powers to intervene in a way that promotes independence. Because from the Chinese perspective, Taiwan can't be independent because it is permanently and forever part of China. That's the one China policy. But again, the immaturity, the ignorance, and any other insult I can possibly come up with to describe your prime minister's words is shocking. But it's an act of desperation. Let's just push aside the potential of China invading Taiwan overnight if Ukraine falls. Isn't going to happen. Isn't just literally not going to happen. It shows that the man knows nothing about what's going on there. But let's ask why he said that. Why would he say this? Because he knows that Ukraine is losing this conflict. He knows it for certain. because it is. There's nothing that can be done to salvage the situation for Ukraine. And so what they're trying to do is achieve the impossible. There's an old saying that we, after 9/11, we justified every military intervention overseas by saying we have to fight them over there so we don't have to fight them here. And so he's doing a reverse of that, which is, you have to fight what? Mm-hmm. What are you fighting in Ukraine? Russia. You're not fighting China. But we have to fight them now, or we have to fight them over there. How stupid is that? The ignorance that's contained in that statement is beyond belief. But again, it's the idea that Poland thinks it has a voice. I don't mean to insult. I know it comes off sometimes when I say these things, and I don't mean to be insulting, but I'm just being realistic. Poland has no voice in the world. What is Poland? Who is Poland? I'm not meaning that you don't have humanity, but as a nation, do you really think you have a voice on this stage? Do you think if Poland barks, China listens? Yes, the Chinese embassy came out and responded because they're there in Warsaw. I can guarantee you that nobody in China cares because China doesn't care about Poland. Poland doesn't change the Chinese meter one bit. Poland is saying things, the Polish prime minister is saying things in order to make Poland appear to be more influential than it is. It's not. But it just, again, shows, all he did is emphasize the fact that he himself is totally inadequate for the position that he's in, and that Poland is inadequate as a nation for the position it's trying to assert itself in. Poland can't, look, Poland can be Poland. Every nation has a potential, a great potential. And Poland is a Central European nation that if the Poles would just, not the Polish people, but the Polish government would just think, the reason why you haven't developed as a nation is because invading armies cross your soil to get to one another's throats. And the Polish people pay the price all the time.
Yes.
Now let's take a lesson from the Chinese people that your prime minister just denigrated. What did China just do in the Middle East? They went there and they got the Saudi Arabians and the Iranians to make peace. That's the last thing the United States wanted, because we wanted the Saudi Arabians and the Iranians to be each other's throats, because that helps create power for America, because we need violence to be a power. Peace is the last thing we want. But look at what's happening with the Saudis and Iran now. Peace is breaking out all over. It's going to, the potential for economic revival and economic flourishment is real, because they won't allow their land to become a battleground between the United States and Russia, the United States and China. Poland, don't allow your land to become a battleground between the United States and Russia, the United States and China. You are centrally located, not to be the place where armies march over, but where economies transit. You are perfectly positioned to be that which unites Europe with Russia, with Asia. That is Poland. And if you did this properly, you could become a great nation, not because of military strength. Please don't build up your military. Every dime you spend on a tank is a dime spent in vain. A, your tanks aren't going to be that good. B, they're going to be blown up. And C, that money should be spent making super highways, making, high-speed rail, making connectivity. You should become the connecting tissue between Europe, Russia, and Asia. You should be the place where everybody wants to come. Poland, Warsaw should have banks after banks after banks, financial investments coming in. People saying we want to invest in Poland because look what Poland's doing to make this connection happen. Poland is the place we want to be. And now, whenever people want to talk about how we bring the world together, people say, bring in the Poles because they've set such a great example. And so Poland comes in and represents themselves as a people who have done it the right way. The right way never, ever involves a tank. We come back to what you talked about at the beginning. If Poland is buying tanks, you're doing the wrong thing. You don't need tanks. Do you plan on invading anybody lately? The answer is no. And Russia does not plan on invading you. They aren't going to do that. NATO is a giant cesspool that sucks all of your energy in. You need to be the un-NATO. You need to be almost neutral in terms of your military affiliation, because Poland should never seek to be militarily engaged anywhere in the world. It's not needed. What will make Poland great is the connectivity that comes from a land that has always been used as the territory that's crossed forth as nations go to war. You should become the land that people transit for peace, for economic prosperity. That's how Poland becomes a great nation. That's what would define Poland as a great nation. Because if you're trying to play the military game, you're never going to be good enough. Your history shows that.
We will end this here, Scott. Thank you so much for coming today to have this conversation with me.